Shalom. This week we are reading Parshat Tetzaveh. Begins right before the beginning of chapter 28 in the book of Exodus. Parshat Tetzaveh is all about the Kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, the priests that are serving in the temple. We begin by reading about the Kohanim and their clothing, special clothing of the high priest, clothing of the ordinary priests. We read about the inauguration ceremony of the priests, and we read about the succession of the high priest. And so the Parsha is really focusing on these men whose job it is to bring the blessing into the world through the service of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple really supporting the whole world and just shining forth with the presence of God. So who are the Kohanim? All these descendants of Aaron. We know that today there's actually scientific, medical fact, there's research, there are tests that can be done, DNA testing to determine all those male descendants of Aharon. They all actually share a particular chromosome that apparently no one else in the world has. There are books that are written about this. All the male lineal descendants of Aaron share something in their DNA structure that no one else in the world, no other Jews, no one else has. And of course, this is amazingly reflective of several verses in the Torah that tell us about this eternal covenant that God has with the Kohanim. One of them actually is in the book of Exodus 40:59. It states there, "And it shall be for them an appointment as priests forever, for all generations." Then again in Deuteronomy 18:5 we find, "For the Lord your God has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand and serve in the name of the Lord, him and his sons forever." So obviously there's something going on between Hashem and between the Kohanim. And it's a forever kind of thing. This is a choice that God made. So this is all really interesting. We read about these clothing, and they must look absolutely stunning. The Kohen Gadol wearing his clothing must be some sight to see. In fact, that's the topic of the beautiful piyut, the beautiful poem that we sing in the Beit HaKnesset, in the synagogue on Yom Kippur. We sing all about the Mareh Kohen, the appearance of the high priest, how he looked when he came out in peace from the Holy of Holies. What a sight for sore eyes he was, the Kohen Gadol, wearing his clothing. Because, first of all, we know that clothes make the man. And second of all, we know that there's a very unusual and intrinsic connection between the Kohen doing his service in the Holy Temple and the clothes that he's wearing. Because he's literally not considered to be a Kohen, and his service is not considered to be fitting if he's not wearing those clothing. So, bearing all of that in mind, here is a really interesting midrash, where we are taught that one time there was a Gentile who was passing by a synagogue, and he heard a teacher teaching Torah there to some children. And he heard the teacher expounding upon the verse that we have right here in this week's Torah portion in Tetzaveh, "Ve'ele habagadim asher ya'asu." These are the garments that they shall make. And the teacher is describing to the children all these beautiful garments, and he's saying, and these are the garments. And this fellow who walked by, he was very intrigued. And he came in, and he said to the teacher, "Tell me something. I heard what you were saying. These garments, who are they for?" And the teacher said, "Well, these garments are actually for the high priest." And so this Gentile said to himself, "You know what? I'm going to convert to Judaism on the condition that they make me the high priest." I guess he was really enamored of those garments. So, according to the Midrash, he comes to the famous sage Shammai. And Shammai, everybody knows, was a very kind of severe personality, very strict, and very judgmental in a way. He was very, very kind of a strict personality. So this fellow comes to him and says, "Convert me on the condition that I become the high priest." And Shammai was a builder. He's holding some kind of building tool in his hand. And it says in the Midrash that he pushed him with this tool. And he said, "Get out of here." He must have pushed him down the stairs. He said, "How could you ask such a thing?" Shammai wasn't so patient. But Hillel, on the other hand, Shammai's counterpart, he is known for being extremely patient. And in fact, the heading of this midrash is that one should always try to be as patient as Hillel. So this same non-Jew comes to Hillel and says, convert me on the condition that I become the high priest. So Hillel says, come, my child, come. And he takes him, sits him down, and he teaches him Torah, and he converts him. And so now this fellow says, okay, now I'm ready for the next stage. I said I wanted to be the high priest. So Hillel says, well, you can't exactly serve the king before knowing all the details of what makes him king, how he's king, and how he's sovereign. So why don't you first sit down and start learning in earnest about the details of the king? And so, according to the Midrash, what happens was he started to learn Torah, to study Torah very seriously, and then he comes to the verse in the Torah that says, V'hazar hakarev yumat, and the stranger who draws close shall be worthy of death. And the verse is talking about a non-Kohen who serves in the capacity of Kohen. He bumps into that verse, it comes to the rabbis, and he says, tell me, who's that verse talking about? And the rabbis say, that's even talking about David, king of Israel. That's talking about anyone who's not from the Kohanim, who proposes to be so. So this fellow said to himself, wow, if Israel, about whom the verse says, my firstborn Israel, if it's true regarding every Israelite, even David, the king of Israel, that the stranger among them who draws close shall be put to death, how much more so does this apply to me? And so he kind of got his perspective back, and he got a little bit more in proportion. So what is this really all about? What is the point of this whole story? You know, people are always trying to be something else. I mean, if he would have put on those clothing, he might have looked like a high priest, but he wouldn't have been a high priest. And people say it's not fair. I want to be a Kohen. I want to be the Kohen Gadol. I want to go into that part of the Holy Temple. And everybody's always looking for something instead of looking at what they are and what they're supposed to be and the part that each one of us is supposed to play. So here we have those verses that we read together about the Kohanim, the one in Exodus and the one in Deuteronomy, that clearly emphasize that Hashem has a covenant with the Kohanim, so they know their place. And He chose them for something, and that's forever. But then actually, He also told Israel collectively, just at the giving of the Torah, right before the giving of the Torah, in Parshat Yitro, He said to all of Israel, you shall be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Okay, so the Jews altogether, in some capacity, are considered to be Kohanim, and just as the Kohanim, just as the priests do this, their ministry, as it were, they do this service in the Holy Temple, so too, by some token, the Jews are supposed to be the Kohanim in the whole world. But wait a minute, what about the Gentiles? What about that poor fellow that bothered to convert because he really liked those clothing, and then, okay, he got himself maybe back into the proper perspective, and he realized that it wasn't really applicable because it wasn't him. But what about that? Well, they also have a part to play, and they're also Kohanim. And Hashem also has a plan for them, because when we look in the end of the book of Isaiah, we find that God says, He says, I will put a sign upon them and send some of them as survivors to the nations, Tarshish, Pul, Lud, the archers, Tuval and Yavan, the distant islands who have not heard of my fame and not seen my glory, and they will declare my glory among the nations. They will bring all your brethren from all the nations as an offering to Hashem, with horses and with chariots and with covered wagons and with mules. The verse goes on to say, coming to my holy mountain, from them too I will take men to be Kohanim and Levites. So there are many different interpretations of what this verse means, but the simple interpretation certainly means that Hashem will be taking Kohanim and Leviim, priests and Levites, from among the nations as well. So everybody has a part in the plan, and Hashem actually chose the Kohanim, and it's an eternal covenant between Him and them forever, but He actually chose every single one of us. And every single one of us has a part in that plan. And the idea is essentially, maybe, instead of pretending to be someone else, or or trying to do someone else's job. It's really the challenge about us, each one of us, being exactly the people that we're supposed to be. Each one of us in our own way, with our own particular brand of the priesthood, to get the job done so that the honor and the glory of God is magnified in this world.